"You promised you'd come back," the little girl said to the millionaire on the bridge, but moments later something terrible happens. Comment what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10 and tell me which city you're watching from. I really want to know if you like my story and get to know you better, so please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The deafening noise of traffic on the Workers' Bridge in Riverbend echoed like a chaotic symphony on Monday morning. Arthur Vance, 48, drummed his fingers on the leather steering wheel of his black Mercedes, his eyes fixed on the dashboard clock that read 7:47 a.m. 3 more minutes late, and he would miss the meeting with the Japanese investors. His lean face reflected the tension accumulated over decades of building a textile empire at the expense of everyone and everything around him. The stiffness in his shoulders betrayed years of sleepless nights and weekends, sacrificed at the altar of ambition. Arthur had transformed a small sewing workshop, inherited from his father, into one of the largest textile factories in the state. But the price of this achievement was a loneliness he insisted on ignoring. His obsession with absolute control had pushed away his wife, his children, and the few friends he once had. The light turned green, and Arthur stepped on the accelerator, eager to escape the morning traffic jam. It was then that he saw a small figure running between the stopped cars, her steps uncoordinated with desperate urgency. The child moved like a wounded bird, dodging vehicles with an agility that defied her young age. "You promised you'd come back," the girl shouted, her words cutting through the air like sharp blades. Arthur slammed on the brakes, his heart racing, as he realized the child was running directly toward his car. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old, her messy brown hair framing a little face smudged with dirt and tears. Her clothes, a faded pink t-shirt and ripped shorts, told a story of days without proper care. The girl's small hands slammed against the driver's side window with a surprising force for someone so small. "You promised," she repeated, her brown eyes shining with a desperate hope that stirred something in Arthur's hardened chest. He slowly lowered the window, completely bewildered by the situation. "Little girl, I think you've mistaken me for someone else," he said, trying to keep his voice calm despite the turmoil he felt. "No," she protested, banging on the window again. "You said you would get Violetta. She fell into the creek 3 weeks ago, and you promised you'd come back." Arthur looked around, searching for the child's parents or any responsible adult, but he only saw impatient drivers honking behind him. The girl remained there, planted next to his car, tears leaving clean streaks on her dirty face. "What's your name?" he asked, turning off the engine and accepting that he would be late for the meeting. "Lily," she replied, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "And you can't have forgotten about Violetta. She's my most important doll, and you promised you'd get her when the water went down." The name echoed in Arthur's mind with a disturbing familiarity, although he was absolutely certain he had never seen this child before. There was something in her eyes, in the way she stared at him with unshakable confidence, that made him deeply uneasy. "Lily, I never promised you anything," he said gently, getting out of the car and crouching down to her level. "But tell me about this doll." "Violetta has yellow hair and wears a blue dress," Lily explained, the words tumbling out in her anxiety. "She fell from the bridge when I was playing and went down the creek. You were here and saw it happen. You said that when the rain stopped and the water went down, you would come get her for me." Arthur felt a strange tightness in his chest. The child's sincerity was absolute, but he couldn't remember any such episode. In recent months, he had crossed that bridge hundreds of times, always focused on his business, always oblivious to the world around him. "Where are your parents, Lily?" he asked, noticing how her clothes smelled of mildew and old food. The girl's face immediately clouded over. "I don't have a mum or dad. I live with Aunt Carol in the yellow house near the creek. And where is your aunt now? Sleeping. She always sleeps in the morning because she works at night collecting cans. Lily wiped away more tears. But you promised about Violeta. You can't forget a promise to a child. Arthur looked at his watch again. The meeting had already started, but something in the child's vulnerability prevented him from simply driving away. There was a fierce determination in her small eyes, a strength that contrasted with her apparent fragility. "Show me where the doll fell," he said, surprising himself. Lily's face lit up instantly. "Are you really going to get her?" "I'll try." Lily took his hand with complete trust, guiding him to the side of the bridge, where a narrow path led down to the creek. Arthur sent a quick text cancelling the meeting, a decision that would have been unthinkable for him 5 hours earlier. The creek ran low between the rocks, the water level indeed lower after weeks without rain. Lily pointed to a spot where branches and debris had accumulated against a larger rock. "There," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "That's where I last saw Violeta." Arthur carefully made his way down to the bank, getting his expensive Italian shoes wet as he searched among the detritus. After a few minutes, he found something that glinted under the wet branches. It was a small doll, its blonde hair tangled and its blue dress stained with mud, but still recognizable. When he emerged from the water holding the doll, Lily let out a cry of joy that echoed across the bridge. She ran to him, hugging his legs with a force that nearly knocked him over. "Violeta! My Violeta!" she cried, clutching the dirty doll to her chest, as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. Arthur watched the scene with a strange emotion building in his chest. When was the last time someone had shown so much gratitude for something he had done? When was the last time his own children had looked at him with that pure admiration? "I knew you would come back," Lily said, looking up at him with bright eyes. "I knew you wouldn't forget your promise." But Arthur couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that there was more to this situation than he could comprehend. Why was this child so sure that he had made a promise? And why, looking at her now, did he feel as if he owed something he didn't even know he was supposed to give? Arthur followed Lily through the narrow streets of the riverside neighborhood, his leather shoes echoing against the cracked pavement. The contrast between his Mercedes parked on the bridge and this labyrinth of simple houses made him feel like a foreigner in his own city. The girl walked ahead of him with the doll clutched to her chest, her light, confident steps guiding him through alleys he had never noticed on his hurried drives through the area. The yellow house Lily had mentioned turned out to be a small, worn-out structure with peeling paint and windows protected by rusted bars. The yard was a patch of dirt where colorful clothes swayed on a clothesline, and Arthur could see through the ajar door a simple, dark interior. "Aunt Carol should be waking up now," Lily said, hesitating before pushing the gate. "She gets a little mad when I wake her up early, but I have to show her that Violeta is back." Arthur noticed the child's reluctance and felt a pang of concern. "Does your aunt often get mad at you?" "Not really mad," Lily explained quickly, as if she were used to defending the situation. "She's just tired because she works so much. You know, collecting things to sell and taking care of us. Us. Me, Peter, and Jasmine. Aunt Carol takes care of kids who have nowhere to stay." Lily pushed the gate open and motioned for Arthur to follow. "Come meet her. I'm sure she'll remember you." As they entered the house, Arthur was hit by the smell of strong coffee mixed with dampness and something he couldn't identify. The living room was furnished with old sofas covered in colorful fabrics, and the walls displayed children's drawings taped up. 2 other children were playing on the floor, a boy of about 6 building a puzzle with missing pieces, and a slightly older girl flipping through a torn comic book. "Aunt Carol," Lily called out, her voice echoing through the house. "Violeta is back." Heavy footsteps came from the direction of the bedrooms, and a woman of 52 appeared in the living room, adjusting a faded nightgown over her tired body. Carol had graying hair tied in a messy bun and eyes that revealed years of struggle and hardship. When she saw Arthur, her expression hardened immediately. "Lily, who is this man?" she asked, her voice rough from just waking up. "It's him, Auntie, the man who promised to get Violetta," Lily said, holding up the doll as evidence. Carol studied Arthur from head to toe, noticing the expensive suit, the gold watch, the leather shoes that cost more than she earned in months. Her posture became defensive, her arms crossed over her chest. "I don't know you," she said directly to Arthur, "and I don't like strangers in my house, especially rich men who show up out of nowhere." Arthur understood the woman's suspicion and tried to explain. "Ma'am, I'm just as confused about this whole situation. Lily approached me on the bridge this morning, insisting I had promised to get her doll. I've never seen her before, but you came." "Anyway," Carol interrupted, studying him with piercing eyes. "Why?" The simple question left Arthur momentarily speechless. Why had he cancelled the most important meeting of the month to follow a strange child? Why was he here, in this humble house, when he should be closing million-dollar deals? "She seemed to need it," he finally said, the answer sounding inadequate even to his own ears. Carol continued to watch him, but her posture relaxed slightly. "Lily has a very active imagination. Sometimes she mixes dreams with reality, especially about people who could help our family." "It wasn't my imagination," Lily protested, clutching the doll. "He was on the bridge and saw Violetta fall. He promised he would come back." "Honey," Carol said firmly, "you're getting things mixed up again. How many times do I have to explain that not everyone can help us?" Arthur observed the interaction between the two, noticing how Carol spoke to Lily. There was affection there, but also a deep exhaustion that he recognized. It was the weariness of someone carrying responsibilities beyond their capacity. "May I ask how Lily came to be here?" Arthur said gently. Carol hesitated, glancing at the other children who were playing, oblivious to the conversation. "That's none of your business, Mr. Arthur Vance." The name seemed to spark some recognition in Carol, who frowned. Vance. Where have I heard that name before?" "I own a textile factory here in Riverbend. Vance and Associates." Carol's eyes widened. "The big factory on Industrial Avenue? The one with the tall smokestacks?" "Yes." "My God," she murmured, sitting down heavily on the sofa. "You're the owner of that factory." Something in the way she said it made Arthur feel uncomfortable. Did something happen? Carol looked at Lily, who had sat on the floor to clean the doll with a damp cloth, completely absorbed in the task. "Lily isn't my real niece," she said in a low voice. "She arrived here 8 months ago, brought by a man who couldn't take care of her anymore." "What man?" "Daniel Evans. He worked at your factory until he was fired." Carol fixed her eyes on Arthur. "He said he was wrongly accused of theft." Arthur felt as if the floor had moved beneath his feet. Daniel Evans. The name was in his company's records, but he had delegated the firing decision to his supervisor, Eric Roach. He had never personally investigated the case. "Daniel said his sister Nina was Lily's mother," Carol continued, "but the woman had left, and he was trying to raise the girl on his own. When he lost his job, he couldn't pay rent or buy food anymore. He brought Lily to me because he knew I'd take care of abandoned children." "And where is Daniel now?" "I don't know. He disappeared after he left the girl here. Said he would only come back when he got a job and a decent place for her to live." Carol wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "That was 8 months ago. Lily still waits for him to come back every day." Arthur looked at the little girl, who was humming softly as she arranged the doll's hair. Suddenly, it all started to make a terrible kind of sense. Lily's insistence on the promise, her absolute certainty that he would return. She hadn't mistaken him for some random person. She had mistaken him for the uncle who had abandoned her after being fired from his factory. "Mr. Vance," Carol said, standing up and walking toward him, "if you really are who you say you are, then you need to know that Daniel was a good man. Hard-working, honest. He told me how he was accused of stealing tools, but he swore he was innocent. I didn't investigate the case personally," Arthur admitted, a heavy guilt forming in his chest. "Of course you didn't," Carol said with bitterness. "Men like you don't bother with the details when you're destroying the lives of the poor." The words hit Arthur like slaps to the face. He looked around the simple house, saw the other children that Carol cared for with the scarce resources she had, and understood that his administrative negligence had created this situation. "Lily still talks about her uncle every day," Carol continued. "She made up this story about you promising something because, in her mind, every adult man has the potential to be Daniel coming back to get her." At that moment, Lily looked up from her doll and smiled at Arthur. "Thank you for coming back like you promised," she said with an innocence that broke his heart. Arthur realized he was facing a choice that would define not only Lily's future, but also who he would choose to be from that point on. He could walk out of that house and return to his comfortable life, pretending none of this was his responsibility. Or he could finally face the consequences of his negligent business decisions and try to repair the harm he had caused. "Carol," he said, his voice firmer than he felt, "I need to find Daniel Evans, and until I do, I'd like to help with Lily's expenses." "I don't want your charity," she replied immediately. "It's not charity. It's responsibility." 3 months had passed since that first encounter on the bridge, and Arthur's life had changed irrevocably. His mornings now began with a stop at Carol's yellow house, bringing fruit, milk, and sometimes toys for Lily and the other children. The girl always greeted him with the same radiant smile, as if his presence confirmed that not all adults disappeared from her life. But the search for Daniel Evans had proven more complex than Arthur had imagined. The man had simply vanished after leaving Lily with Carol, as if the earth had swallowed him whole. Arthur had hired a private investigator, checked employment records throughout the region, and even placed discreet ads in local newspapers. Nothing on that. Thursday morning, Arthur was in his office at the factory when he decided to take an action he had been postponing for weeks. He picked up the phone and called Human Resources. "Monica, I need you to bring me the complete file for the employee Daniel Evans, fired 8 months ago." "Of course, Mr. Vance. Anything specific you're looking for?" "I want to see all the documentation regarding the theft accusation, and I want to speak with the person who made the complaint." 20 minutes later, Monica knocked on his door, carrying a relatively thin, yellow folder. "Here's the file. Sir, the complaint was made by Supervisor Eric Roach. He said Daniel was taking factory tools home." Arthur opened the file and read with growing attention. The report was simple. Eric had caught Daniel leaving the factory with a bag containing pliers and screwdrivers. Daniel denied any intent to steal, claiming he had borrowed the tools to fix a sink in the house where he lived, but Eric hadn't accepted the explanation. "Where are the tools that were supposedly stolen?" Arthur asked. "According to the report, they were returned the next day," Monica replied, consulting her papers. "Daniel brought everything, back before the termination was even official." Arthur frowned. Something didn't make sense. If the tools were returned and Daniel had shown no resistance, why was the firing upheld? "I want to speak with Eric now," he said. Eric Roach was a 45-year-old man who had been at the factory for over a decade. He had always been considered a competent supervisor, though some employees found him too rigid. When he entered Arthur's office, his posture was confident, but there was a nervousness in his eyes. Mr. Vance, how can I help you? I want you to tell me about the Daniel Evans case. Eric's face hardened immediately. That case was resolved months ago, sir. Why is it being revisited? Because I need to better understand what happened. Arthur leaned forward in his chair. Daniel returned the tools, didn't he? He did, yes, but that doesn't change the fact that he took them without authorization. To fix a sink at home, as he claimed. A common excuse among thieves, Eric replied with disdain. Mr. Vance, with all due respect, Daniel Evans had been problematic for months. He was arriving late, questioning orders, causing trouble with other employees. Arthur studied Eric's face, noticing how the man avoided direct eye contact. Funny that's not in his file. Your previous reports on him were always positive. We don't always document minor disciplinary issues, sir. We try to resolve them internally. I see. Arthur stood up and walked to the window overlooking the factory floor. Eric, I want you to be completely honest with me. Was there any other reason you wanted to get rid of Daniel? I don't know what you're talking about, sir. I'm talking about the fact that Daniel left behind an orphaned niece when he lost his job. A 4-year-old girl who now lives in a home for abandoned children because her uncle can't support her. For the first time, Eric looked genuinely surprised. I didn't know about the child. You didn't know, or you didn't care to know. Eric fell silent for a long moment. Arthur could see the internal conflict playing out on the man's face, the struggle between maintaining his version of events and facing the consequences of his actions. Mr. Vance, Eric said finally, Daniel Evans was fired for just cause. That is the official truth, and it's the only truth that matters. The official truth, Arthur repeated slowly. Interesting choice of words. After Eric left the office, Arthur remained alone for a long time, staring at Daniel's file. There was something deeply wrong with the story, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He decided to take a more drastic step. That afternoon, he went directly to the factory floor. It was rare for him to appear there unannounced, and his presence caused a stir among the employees. He sought out older workers, people who might have known Daniel personally. That's how he found John Miller, a 58-year-old mechanic who had been in maintenance for 15 years. John, I need to talk to you about Daniel Evans. The man's face immediately closed off. Mr. Vance, I'd rather not comment on former employees. Please, it's important. John looked around, checking if anyone was listening. Can I speak frankly, sir? Please do. Daniel was one of the best employees I've ever seen here, hard-working, honest, always willing to help his colleagues. John paused. His firing made no sense to any of us. Why not? Because everyone borrows a tool now and then, sir. It's normal, and Daniel always returned everything he borrowed. John lowered his voice, but some of us think there was something more behind his dismissal. What kind of thing? John hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Sir, I can't prove anything, but some people thought it was strange that right after Daniel was fired, Supervisor Eric started showing up with a new car, expensive clothes, like he'd gotten an extra pile of cash, you know? Arthur's blood ran cold. Are you suggesting that Eric was bribed to fire Daniel? I'm not suggesting anything, sir. I'm just saying what some of us observed. Arthur thanked John and left the factory floor, his mind racing. If his suspicions were correct, Daniel had been unjustly fired as part of some larger scheme. But who would benefit from his departure? That night, Arthur couldn't sleep. He lay awake mentally reviewing all the events of the past few months, trying to connect the dots. At 3 a.m, he made a decision. He would hire a professional investigator, not just to find Daniel, but to uncover the truth about his dismissal. The next day, when he visited Lily at Carol's house, the girl noticed something was different. You're sad today, she said, hugging his legs as she had on the first day. I'm worried, Lily, but not about you. Is it because of Uncle Daniel? Arthur crouched down to her level. How do you know? Because you always get sad when Aunt Carol talks about him. Lily touched his face with her small hand. Are you going to find him? I'm going to try very hard. I know you will, she said with the absolute confidence that only children possess. Because you keep your promises. But at that moment, Arthur felt like an imposter. Lily believed in him with an unwavering faith, but he was beginning to discover that the business world he had built was based on lies and corruption that he himself had allowed to fester. The question that haunted him was, when he found Daniel, how could he look the man in the eye and ask for forgiveness for something that might just be the tip of a much larger iceberg? And more importantly, would he be able to offer reparations for damage that might have destroyed many more lives than just those of Daniel and Lily? 6 months after Arthur launched his investigation, the truth finally began to reveal itself in a devastating way. The private investigator, Charles Morgan, had uncovered an internal corruption network at the factory that extended far beyond Daniel's case. Eric Roach had not only accepted bribes to fire specific employees, but was also diverting materials from the company to sell on the black market. Arthur was in his office when Charles arrived with the final report, accompanied by a discovery that would change everything. Mr. Vance, I found Daniel Evans, he said, placing a folder on the desk. And I also found out why he was really fired. Where is he? Working as a scrap collector at the Maple Creek landfill. He lives in a wooden shack with other workers. Charles opened the folder. But there's something more important you need to know. Daniel wasn't just fired for alleged theft. He had discovered Eric's material diversion scheme and was about to report him. Arthur felt the world spin around him. What do you mean? Daniel worked in the warehouse and noticed discrepancies in the inventories. He started noting the irregularities and found that tons of fabric were disappearing monthly. When he confronted Eric, he was threatened. The theft accusation was a way to get rid of him before he could talk to you. And there's more, Charles continued. I managed to track down the buyers of the diverted materials. One of the companies that regularly bought the stolen fabrics belongs to your ex-wife. Arthur's blood ran cold. Beatrice? The company Coastal Textiles, owned by Beatrice Vance, has been buying materials from your factory at prices far below market value for the past 2 years. She knew she was buying diverted goods. Arthur stood up abruptly, walking to the window. His ex-wife, the woman he had been married to for 15 years, was involved in the scheme that destroyed Daniel's life and consequently Lily's. The irony was bitter. While he considered himself guilty of negligence, Beatrice was an active participant in the corruption. I need to see Daniel immediately, Arthur said. The Maple Creek landfill was a universe of heavy odors and mountains of trash, where dozens of people worked sorting recyclable materials. Arthur had never imagined that one of his former employees could have fallen so low. When he finally found Daniel, he almost didn't recognize him. The 38-year-old man was unrecognizably thin, his hair prematurely gray, his hands calloused from the hard work. Daniel looked up as he saw Arthur approaching, and his expression went through a sequence of emotions: surprise, anger, and finally, resignation. Mr. Vance, he said without stopping his work of sorting aluminum cans. What an honor to receive a visit from the boss. Daniel, I need to talk to you. It's about Lily. The name of his niece made Daniel stop working immediately. How is my girl? She's well cared for. Carol is a good woman. Arthur took a deep breath. Daniel, I've discovered the truth about your dismissal. I know you were wrongly accused. Daniel laughed bitterly. You found out. Took you long. Enough. 8 months of collecting trash to survive. I know you discovered Eric's scheme. I know he fired you to silence you. For the first time, Daniel stopped working completely and looked directly at Arthur. "And what do you plan to do with that information now?" "I want to offer you your job back, with all back pay plus compensation for what you've been through. And I want to make you a partnership offer in the company." "Partnership?" Daniel shook his head. "Mr. Vance, you don't get it. It's not just about the job, it's about dignity. It's about having to abandon a 4-year-old child because you had no way to feed her." Arthur felt the words like daggers. "Daniel, there's something else you need to know about your sister, Nina." Daniel's face changed completely. "What about Nina? Carol told me that she was no longer here." "She didn't leave, Daniel. She's alive, but she's been in a public psychiatric clinic, in a catatonic state for over a year." Daniel dropped the cans he was holding. "That's impossible." Carol said. "Carol didn't know the whole truth. Nina worked as a night cleaner at my factory. She had an accident that caused a severe head trauma. The accident was covered up by Eric to avoid a lawsuit." Daniel leaned against a pile of cardboard, his legs trembling. "My sister is alive?" "She is. And there's hope for recovery with the right treatment. I've already arranged for her to be transferred to a specialized private clinic." At that moment, Daniel began to cry. They weren't tears of sadness, but of a complex mixture of relief, anger, and hope. "Why are you doing this? Why now?" "Because a 4-year-old girl taught me that some promises can't be broken, because Lily believes that adults keep their word, and because I discovered that I built my success on the suffering of people like you." 2 weeks later, Daniel was back at the factory, not as an ordinary employee, but as the supervisor of the new ethics and transparency department that Arthur had created. Eric had been fired and reported to the proper authorities. The company was undergoing a complete restructuring with an external audit and the implementation of new safety and honesty protocols. But the biggest transformation happened when Nina, after 3 months of intensive treatment at the private clinic, said her daughter's name for the first time. Lily was in the room, playing with her doll Violetta, when her mother opened her eyes and said, "My little flower." The reunion between mother and daughter was a moment that brought tears to the eyes of everyone present. Lily, who had waited so long for this moment, simply nestled into her mother's arms as if they had never been apart. "Mummy, do you remember the song we used to sing together?" Lily asked. "I remember, my love. Do you want to sing it now?" The final great revelation came when Nina, more recovered, told Arthur how the accident had happened. "I was cleaning Eric's office when I found documents that proved the theft. When he discovered me photographing the papers with my phone, he became furious. There was an argument, and he pushed me. I hit my head on the corner of the desk. Do you remember trying to contact me before the accident?" Arthur asked. "Yes. I sent several messages to your secretary, trying to schedule a meeting to show her the evidence. But I never got a response." Arthur then understood that Nina had tried to warn him about the corruption months before Daniel discovered the scheme. If he hadn't been so obsessed with external business, so distant from the employees of his own company, he could have prevented all that suffering. 6 months later, Vance and Associates had become a model of transparency in the region. Daniel was now a minority partner and responsible for a social program that offered professional training to vulnerable people. Nina, completely recovered, worked as a quality supervisor and lived with Lily in a simple but comfortable house that Arthur had helped buy. Beatrice had been sued for receiving stolen goods and forced to reimburse all the diverted funds. The divorce was finalized amicably, with her acknowledging her mistakes and Arthur accepting his share of responsibility for the failure of their marriage. The story came to an end on a Sunday morning, When Arthur visited Daniel's reconstituted family, Lily ran to hug him as she always did, but this time there was something different in her eyes. "Thank you for keeping all the promises," she said, holding his hand. "What promises, Lily?" "For getting Violetta, for bringing Uncle Daniel back, and for waking Mommy up from her long sleep." She smiled. "You're the man who keeps promises." Arthur understood at that moment that Lily had never confused him with someone else. Her childlike mind, in some mysterious way, had recognized in him the potential to be the man she needed him to be. The girl had seen his picture in the newspaper 3 weeks before their meeting on the bridge, an article about regional entrepreneurs, and created the fantasy that he could save her family. "How did you know I could help?" he asked. "Because you had sad eyes just like mine," Lily replied with the simple wisdom of children, "and sad people always understand other sad people." Arthur looked around the house where Daniel, Nina, and Lily were rebuilding their lives, and understood that he had found something more valuable than all the million-dollar contracts he had ever signed. He had found the purpose his life had always been searching for, disguised in the form of a promise made to a 4-year-old child on the busy Workers' Bridge in Riverbend. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.